reflecting over the course of the day about hearing from everyone about the sort of unprecedented times that we live in. Information flows and technological development have totally upended our society and our way of life. And have also increased the expectation that when conflict arises, almost like within the laws of physics, an equal force will rise up to meet it immediately. And I was thinking about my early career at the International Criminal Court, and I don't know, Pubudu, if you remember this, but there was a time when conflicts were raging, the thought process was, the law waits. We don't get involved. I remember very clearly watching conflicts like Côte d'Ivoire, like what was happening in Uganda, and just everyone was saying, well, we'll wait till it's over, and then we will conduct our investigations, and then we will begin proceedings. We should reflect on how different a time it is now. Now we're talking about getting involved immediately while people are still shooting each other. Raising the level of documentation so that, we can already disrupt criminal activity as it's taking place in an open armed conflict. That's a big, big change. I think we should also reflect on the nature of the criminal enterprise that itself has also evolved quite a lot. I remember when we started, we were talking a lot about state actors and non-state actors. And a lot of the criminal activity at the international level was being conducted by these actors, a lot of times in isolation. They had like some kind of ideological bend or some kind of, state interest in pursuing these conflicts, and then they went about doing so. Now, you see these vast networks, as we've heard, Chris was describing, we've heard talked about today. So if criminals are interested, let's talk about the RSF, for example. They have a network that spans from the UAE to Turkey to Libya to West Africa. Why shouldn't those who are seeking to combat and disrupt criminal activity not form equal networks, also spanning multiple jurisdictions, also drawing from like-minded actors who want to get in the fight? Again, an equal and opposite reaction. In order to do so, I think Sudanese lawyers and the Sudanese civil society around here that are at this conference right now, you are the foundational stone in any accountability response. The documentation efforts that you are doing, we need to continue to work on them. We need to continue, just like criminals are continuing to develop their practices to evade accountability, we need to continue to develop our practices to making sure that the work that we are doing has juridical value, can lead to accountability measures in the future. Because what is true is that when you document to the standard of accountability, you can use that information for advocacy. The opposite is not true. And so, for many different conflicts, we've seen a lot of civil society actors with good faith, documenting for that level of advocacy, and then being frustrated years later to find out that that information is inadmissible at trial. When I look around the room at the moment, I see a lot of organizations, a lot of actors who are willing to join forces with you. It's an interesting moment. We've heard a lot of people talking about it. We heard, from organizations like C4ADS. You're doing documentation work. You're collecting information. They can take those cases that you are building, those incidents that you are identifying, they can take that information, those incidents, and take a deeper dive and start answering questions about how the incidents took place, who armed those armed groups, who is financing it. That's a big piece of the puzzle. We have organizations like Legal Action Worldwide who are here, who can help with the nuances of international law, so that you can start thinking about the things that you need to find in your investigations and making sure that all of these stones are uncovered before we approach actors who can pursue accountability. I see regional civil society actors around the table who can help sensitize their populations as to what the hell is going on in Sudan and why that impacts on the populations of Kenya, of Mauritius, of Uganda, of Chad, of South Africa. Not only that, as we heard a couple of panels ago, these same actors can be testing the water. They can be pushing the jurisprudence. They can be ensuring that if arrest warrants are issued, those actors wouldn't dare come to their countries without fear of prosecution and arrest. That is a massive role to play and a wonderful part of the coalition. We can also think about, a lot has been said about the political dynamics and do we have political will? Well, we can create political will together. And where we reach roadblocks, we have to be dynamic. There may be a certain country where at the moment, because of the political situation, a universal jurisdiction case is not feasible. Let's take Uganda, for example. Does that mean that Uganda doesn't have a role to play? We have tens of thousands of Sudanese currently taking up residence in Kampala. Among their number, we know for a fact there are victims, there are witnesses, and there are perpetrators. A big part of building some of these cases will involve being able to hand over near complete case files to overworked prosecuting authorities. They do not have the resources to be able to do structural investigations on conflicts outside of their jurisdiction. But if we do that work for them, it's going to be very difficult. What arguments will they have left not to intervene? There are so many actors, and we have met them in the Kenyan prosecution service, in the Ugandan prosecution service, in the Mauritian prosecution service, who are good faith, ready to act. They see it as in their interest. But we got to meet them halfway. We got to help them. And so going back to the Uganda example, there's a situation there where civil society actors in Uganda can help identify witnesses and make sure that they are available to give testimony to prosecuting authorities in other states. That is a big contribution. We don't even have to go through mutual legal assistance in certain circumstances. Civil society actors can fill that space. Now, with respect to the avenues for disruption, we've heard a lot about it, and I don't want to repeat. But I do think it's worth thinking about all the tools that we actually have at our disposal, because at moments like this, it's easy to feel disempowered. But after 2 days of talking with all of you, that is not the feeling I have. I see a lot of people who are willing to get in the fight with you. And some of those tools that we have at our disposal, obviously we have sanction regimes that come from the United States that can add credibility to advocacy campaigns, let's say in Kenya. When people are proposing to set up shadow governments and third-party states, populations have a right to know, who are these people? And if they have been sanctioned, and they have been found to have credible allegations against them for committing crimes against humanity, that helps in a public advocacy campaign. I think another avenue at our disposal, we've heard talked about briefly, but the freezing of assets. Wars cost money. Without that money, it's difficult to continue to prosecute these conflicts. We're seeing that happen, unfortunately, in the context of Ukraine. Here, we have actors who have the technical sophistication, plus we have actors in prosecution services who are willing to move on this. And the evidentiary threshold to intervene on the freezing of assets is relatively low compared to what it would be in a criminal trial. So again, these are ways that we can get involved quickly to get in the fight. 1 more minute. Last thing I'll say, I think also, arrest warrants. And now going back to the idea of universal jurisdiction, there may be certain jurisdictions, once cases are built, that are, for political reasons, have a larger appetite for taking on this kind of responsibility. Once we build that muscle, once we start breaking this narrative of non-intervention in African affairs, with other African states getting involved, it's going to be that much easier. When arrest warrants are being issued by African states against other Africans for committing crimes against Africans, I want to live in that world. It's not that far away. It's not. You heard so many actors talking about it today. I think one thing I want to kind of leave you with is the idea that some of these major institutions, and believe me, I worked at one for a long time, they're slow. And despite their best efforts, they're probably going to remain so. That's why you keep hearing so many people who have been in those institutions, like myself, like Nick, like others, say that the future of international law is in the domestic space because it's way more dynamic. All of you are way more dynamic than these big institutions. Let the big institutions be there to do and play their role. But that system does not work without our support. And I think in general, all of us as lawyers, we need to increase the pace of our work, but also the appetite for experimentation. I think a lot of us are kind of like, well, we want to recommend big tribunals, and we want to recommend that the ICC, extends its jurisdiction. I think we need to get way more strategic. Let's not talk about things that are not likely to happen. Let's focus our energy on the things that we can actually achieve. Let's have the courage and the conviction to test. The method and the commission of crimes, the criminals, they continue to innovate as technology develops. We must do the same.